This is a second video in a series on template analysis. It goes through the steps and process of doing template analysis, which is a data analysis technique that was developed by Nigel King and Joanna Brooks. And there are two resources, key resources by them that I've included on this slide that you can refer to at your own pace for more information, especially their book from 2017. And this is a third in a series of videos on template analysis. The other two went through gave an introduction about template analysis and also its use and philosophical underlying philosophy that guides template analysis. So how do you conduct template analysis? King and Brooks listed 7 steps in sequence. However, the authors state that the method is flexible and can be adapted to the study needs. The style should not be viewed as narrowly prescriptive. Instead, any changes you make to the technique should be made clear with reasons. The style works well with an audit trail for a clear demonstration and explanation of how themes are developed and how you reach the final template structure. The technique also emphasizes the use of a hierarchy of codes and the development of a coding template from a subset of data that then gets applied to further data, revised, refined, and then reapplied again. There is also an expectation to move and cycle back and forth between steps due to the high iterative nature of template analysis. This means that most of the procedural steps gets repeated multiple times before finishing the analysis of the data. So let's have a look at the 7 steps that King and Brooks went through in their book from 2017 and the ones that you can follow in template analysis, which I've listed here. They start from familiarization with data, preliminary coding, clustering of data, producing an initial template, applying and developing the template, final interpretation, and also writing up. So the first step of template analysis involves you familiarizing yourself with the data. That involves sitting down, having a look at your transcripts, and familiarizing yourself with the data, what you're having to deal with here, which is no easy task. In larger studies, King and Brooks said of more than, say, 10 or fewer hour long interviews, you can select a subset of accounts with which to start. Their general advice really is to start with a varied subset of data. In step 2, then, you should start to do preliminary coding. This involves going through the data more closely and highlighting anything that you see is of interest to you with a short explanatory commentary. Preliminary comments are then used to define potential themes. A theme, just so you are aware, how is it defined by King and Brooks? They define themes as recurrent and distinctive features of participants' accounts, characterizing particular perceptions and or experiences which you, the researcher, see as relevant to the research question. King and Brooks also highlighted 3 key features of themes in general in template analysis. Themes are not objective facts waiting to be discovered in the data. Themes should be distinct from each other and useful with no extensive overlap between them. And third, themes expect some sort of a repetition across a number of cases. Although themes within single cases could be something of interest to you, that distinguishes them from other cases. Now, for your information, coding is defined as the process of identifying themes in text and attaching labels or codes to them. Although you should keep in mind the possibility that you may have some codes which are neither themes nor serving to index themes. In regards to using a priori themes or a priori codes, those are codes that are predefined prior to the interviews. King and Brooks say that you are not obliged to use these in template analysis. The choice of using them or not depend really, after all, on your research. A priori themes can be identified for multiple reasons. One of those reasons could be that the importance of a particular issue in relation to a research question is already well established. A priori themes can also be used in different ways, as hard or as soft. Soft a priori themes are more loosely defined and usually broader in nature, consisting possibly of aspects of the data in which you have an interest in. So it's important to know that there are hard a priori themes could be considered soft. These are loosely defined and broader versus hardly defined, or the opposite. So these are more rigid ones that maybe you're trying to confirm. Also, King and Brooks said that a priori themes should be limited in number to avoid unwanted blinkering effects on your analysis. Their inclusion should be thought carefully with a clear correspondence to key concepts and views. Also, they should also be used tentatively, as some may prove to be irrelevant, not of use, or have a meaning with the potential for redefinition or discarding. Something also useful to know about template analysis is case summaries. It is another aspect that King and Brooks talked about in template analysis. They differ from other thematic analysis styles, as they are used to retain a sense of participants' views in a more holistic way. Case summaries could be useful in ensuring any themes work in context of the participants' experiences as a whole, and as a way to give examples of how the phenomenon that you are dealing with is being studied, that you are studying is manifested in people's lives. So brief summaries could be written that captures the participant's story and, if relevant, the dynamics of the interview. So these are usually written soon after data collection and should give an impression of you as a researcher to the participant. The authors included an example of a case summary under page 32, in particular box 3.2 of their book from 2017, which you can visit and read to give you an idea of how you can write case summaries. Once themes have been identified, they are then arranged into meaningful clusters. It is also useful to think about how they relate to each other within and between clusters. If a priori themes are used, these do not need to necessarily be top-level themes heading up a certain cluster. Themes could be moved all around an emerging structure. And you can also use sticky post-it notes to help you to try out different ways of structuring and clustering themes. And this is something that I've used during my analysis stage, and these were very, very useful. An initial template can be developed based on a handful of data. There is no guidelines as to, how many transcripts or other data items needed to do for you to do preliminary coding. The authors, King and Brooks, caution, though, against becoming oversensitized to material that easily fit your template. Also, other two things to keep in mind is that hierarchical coding is celebrated in template analysis, where multiple levels of coding and themes can be developed. There can be as many levels of coding as you want, and if you find these helpful, to explore your research questions. Now, top-level themes can be underlined by sub-themes and so on. When it comes to depth versus breadth of coding, the author's advice is to ensure that there is a balance, and that balance is achieved between the depth of coding in the process and also the organization and interpretation of data in the final stages of the project. Parallel coding, where two or more distinct themes are used, is also allowed, as well as, it is allowed, but you have to be cautious about that. You may also find during this step of your data analysis that there are themes that you can see as permeating some thematic clusters that you have. What to do in this case is just know them. Note these, make notes about them, because these integrative themes are like undercurrents. They run through participants' excerpts or accounts. They may also be implicitly raised by or addressed by participants and can be viewed as pervading participants' discussion of the research topic. Now, once you have an initial template of your themes and you've developed these templates, the template then can get applied to fresh material. This is where further modification can be made to your themes on your template to incorporate the new material. And these modifications could include, things like you inserting new themes, you are refining current ones, you merge themes, you change the scope of your themes for example, moving some from top to lower level in the template structure. And also, it could also include deleting some of the themes because you find them redundant. This process under this step 5 can be repeated several times, noting possible revisions as you go before constructing a new version of your template. There is no fixed number on how many iterations this step should take, but time and resources might need to be considered. Regardless of the changes that you make and the modifications that you end up making, your analysis should not leave any relevant data unchecked or uncoded. This whole systematic nature of template analysis, it really provides an excellent audit trail that demonstrates the quality of your data analysis. When you have a final version of your template and you think this is maybe there, the original data set will need to be revised once more to apply the final template to the whole data set. So this is something to keep in mind. Once this is finished, the template can now provide the basis of the interpretation of your data and be a useful guide when it is time to structure and write up your research findings. Producing the final template then is usually followed up with developing a final interpretation of your coded data and presenting an account of this. So this is step 6 of your template analysis. How you start interpretation depends on 3 things: your aims, your philosophical position, and the content of your specific piece of work. King and Brooks included some useful general guidelines which may help. These may help you do this interpretation step. These include try to examine patterns of themes within your data. So don't just simply summarize key findings under each thematic headings. However, this still depends on the themes and whether, for example, they may show you some subtle differences in views between, say, 2 groups of participants. Also, what you could do, you could prioritize themes. Consider which themes or clusters of themes that might provide insights into your topic than others. And prioritizing the themes, in doing so, you need to examine in greatest depth some of these. And to help you think about which themes to consider, King and Brooks suggested considering the following: the relevance of the themes and or the links between the themes in your research question, themes that contradict common assumptions and or conclusions in the current literature, including those that surprise you maybe by their lack of prominence. Also, themes that distinguish between groups of participants in meaningful ways. Also, something to bear in mind is that if a theme seems to be important for participants, but does not seem to be related to the identified, aim of your study, then consider whether these themes will help in the understanding of any of the central themes identified. And if yes, then include them in your interpretation. Also, another technique you could use is finding and developing connections between themes. So it is useful to explore how your themes relate to each other, in addition to the hierarchy of codes and relationships within clusters. This could simply be reflected by noting how certain themes tend to coincide in your data and what this says about the topic that you are investigating. Also consider any integrative or lateral themes, which could give an insight into connections of the phenomenon that you are investigating, or to critique and propose revisions to your current theoretical model. Another point that is worth considering is whether your analysis could be deepened by incorporating other forms of analysis beside template analysis. So, for example, drawing on case summaries with the thematic coding could be useful, and this could be taken further by considering a narrative analysis of some or all of your cases. Okay, or it could be maybe you use discourse-based analysis and so on. Quality checks is another thing that King and Brooks talked about to consider for your final interpretation. And they have gone through possible ways to do your quality checks. These are included under table 3.2 of their book from page 41. And these may include doing, independent coding, respondent feedback or participant feedback, keeping an audit trail, and doing thick descriptions and use of participant quotes. Now, this takes us to the final step of template analysis, the writing up stage. To present a coherent account of the interpretation that you've just made of your data, the authors, King and Brooks, suggested broad approaches to presenting your data analysis study. These are 3 approaches that they've recommended and they've selected, and you can select either of them to use, but you have to use also direct or verbatim quotes from participants. So the first approach is you could write up your template analysis as a series of individual case studies, followed by a discussion of similarities and differences between cases. Case summaries can be useful here alongside the thematic coding within each participant's data, although the method might not be suitable for larger numbers of participants. You can use a second approach, which is where you can structure your story around the main themes, identified with the use of verbatim quotes or examples taken from your data to demonstrate your line of reasoning. However, by focusing, something to keep in mind, by focusing on across case rather than within case analysis, you may run the risk of losing holistic understanding in relation to individual stories. And then there is the third option, which is you overcome the limitations of the first 2 approaches, and you do a form of synthesis of both approaches, which is something that I've done in my own PhD. This consists of a combination of thematic presentation of findings and a small number of case studies, but cases will need to be chosen fairly in a way that represent themes in the overall data set. And finally, how do you present your final template in template analysis? Generally, King and Brooks recommended 2 ways. The first way is as a linear list presentation style, or as a diagrammatic or a mind map style. If using diagrams or mind maps, you can use connecting arrows and typographic effects to show coding levels. So hopefully this video gave you a detailed point-by-point and step-by-step information about how to do template analysis in real life using the 2 resources by King and Brooks, especially their book from 2017.